You were never really part of this family, Maren. You were just his charity case. That's what my brother-in-law said to me, standing 3 feet from my husband's flag-draped casket before the honor guard had even finished folding it. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there in my black dress, holding a folded triangle of stars and stripes that still smelled like jet fuel, and I let him talk. My name is Eric Calloway. My husband was Lieutenant Commander Eric Calloway, United States Navy, call sign Preacher, because he was the only guy in his squadron who never cursed on the radio. He died on a training flight off the coast of Jacksonville 11 months ago. An engine flamed out at 2,000 feet. No fire, no enemy, just bad luck and physics. He was 34, I was 32. We had a 6-year-old daughter named Josie, who still sleeps with his flight jacket instead of a blanket. This isn't a story about losing him. I've told that story to myself every night for almost a year, and I still don't have it right. This is a story about what happened after. About his brother, Derek. About a company. About a piece of paper Eric hid so well that even the government almost missed it. Derek didn't cry at the funeral either, but his reasons were different than mine. Let me back up. Eric and Derek grew up in Pensacola, 2 boys, raised by a father who built a small marine electronics company out of a garage and turned it into something real. Callaway Marine Systems, a mid-sized outfit that made sonar components and navigation hardware for private vessels and a few Coast Guard contracts. When their father died 8 years ago, he split the company between his 2 sons. 50-50, on paper. Except it was never really 50-50. Derek stayed. Derek took the office, the title, the company car. Eric went to flight school instead, then to the fleet, then to combat deployments, then to a training squadron in Florida. Derek ran the business. Eric flew jets and sent home a Navy paycheck, and every quarter, a little bit of money he called the insurance thing. I always assumed that meant a life insurance policy. Eric wasn't a man who explained his finances to me in detail, not because he was hiding something bad, I thought, but because he didn't think it mattered day to day. If anything happens to me, you're taken care of, he told me once, half asleep the week before a deployment. Don't worry about the details. Just trust me. I trusted him. I trusted him completely. Which is exactly why what happened next hit as hard as it did. 2 weeks after the funeral, I got a call from a Navy casualty assistance officer confirming my survivor benefits. The standard package, the SGLI payout, the pension continuation. Straightforward. Expected. Enough to keep the lights on, not enough to feel like anything Eric would call taken care of. Derek called me that same week. Not to check on Josie, not to ask how I was holding up. He called to clarify a few things about the estate, his words, in a tone I can only describe as a man reading from a script he'd rehearsed in a mirror. Look, Maren, he said, I know this is hard. But you should know, whatever Eric told you about being set for life, that was never really about the company. That was just the life insurance talking. The business itself, that's mine. That's always been mine. Eric was never really involved day to day. I don't want you getting the wrong idea and going after something that was never yours to begin with. I said, I never asked about the company, Derek. I know, he said. I'm just getting ahead of it. That was the moment I understood something was being gotten ahead of. I didn't say anything else that night. I hung up the phone, put Josie to bed, and sat alone at my kitchen table with a cold cup of coffee, staring at nothing. I've learned something about grief and suspicion. They don't cancel each other out. You can be shattered and sharp at the same time. I was both. I want to tell you about the year before that phone call because I think it matters more than anything Derek ever said. In words, I don't want to run the place. I just don't want my brother pretending I was never part of building it. I sat there gripping the arms of the chair. He had the shares issued and recorded through a private stock certificate, Walter continued, notarized, filed with the state, kept here in my safe specifically so Derek couldn't quietly redraft the ownership structure while Eric was deployed. Eric was worried about exactly that. He told me his brother had tried more than once to get him to sign paperwork simplifying the ownership. Eric never signed it. Why didn't he tell me? I asked. Walter looked at me with something like sadness. He was planning to. He told me he wanted to sit you down together once he was back from this training rotation and walk you through all of it properly. He said, and again, his words, I don't want her finding out about this from a lawyer. I want her to hear it from me. I had to leave the room for a minute. Walter let me. When I came back, he slid the certificate across the desk. 25% ownership of Calloway Marine Systems, held in the name of Eric J. Calloway, now legally passing to his surviving spouse and dependent as part of his estate. Derek had spent almost a year telling me, and apparently telling the company's own accountant, that Eric's only stake in that business was a decade-old insurance policy. He wasn't lying by accident. He was betting that grief would keep me quiet long enough for the paperwork to disappear into a filing cabinet nobody opened. Walter helped me file the proper legal notice of inherited ownership with the state within the week. He also helped me request a formal accounting of company finances, which is the legal right of any documented shareholder. That request is what set everything in motion. Derek called me 4 days after the notice was filed. This time, there was no script. Tinito the junior, you need to withdraw that filing, he said. No hello. No pretense. I'm not going to do that, Derek. Do you have any idea what you're doing to this company? To this family? I built half of what that business is today. Eric was gone half the year, every year. I was the one here. He was gone defending this country, I said. You were here collecting a salary he helped fund. There was a pause, and then he said the thing I will never forget. The thing that told me everything I needed to know about who he really was. Look, I'm not trying to be the bad guy here. I'll cut you a check. A real one. $150,000 right now, today, and this whole thing goes away quietly. Nobody has to see the books. Nobody has to know anything ugly about how the company's been run. You take the money, you take care of Josie, and everyone keeps their peace. That's a generous offer for a widow with no real claim here. $150,000 to make a 25% stake in a multi-million-dollar company disappear quietly. He wasn't offering me a settlement. He was offering me a bribe to stay silent about something he didn't want anyone looking at too closely. I'll think about it, I told him. And I hung up. I didn't think about it. I called Walter that same hour and told him everything Derek had said, word for word. Walter didn't look surprised. That offer tells us more than any set of books could, he said. A man confident in clean numbers doesn't pay $150,000 to avoid an audit. He was right. The formal accounting request had already triggered a state-mandated review because Calloway Marine Systems held those Coast Guard contracts and was subject to periodic compliance audits, regardless of what Derek wanted. Once my ownership was legally on record, I had every right to attend the company's next scheduled shareholder review. The same review Derek had, for 2 years running, quietly rescheduled or shortened, whenever it threatened to go long enough for real questions to surface. This year, it didn't get shortened. Josie stayed with my mother that weekend, and I walked into a conference room I had never once set foot in, wearing Eric's Navy ball gift to me, a small gold anchor pin I'd pinned to my blazer without fully deciding to. There were 11 people in that room. Company officers, 2 outside auditors, a representative from the Coast Guard contracting office, there for an unrelated compliance matter that happened to fall on the same date. Derek, at the head of the table, visibly unprepared for me to be sitting in it. The auditor's report was dry and procedural, right up until the section on related party disbursements. Over the 2 years since Eric's stock had been formalized and hidden from company records, Derek had authorized several payments to himself and to a consulting firm that, it turned out, he personally owned under a different name. Golf trips billed as client development, a boat billed as company R&D equipment, the fruit basket, all of it small on its own, patterned enough together to matter. The room went quiet in that particular way rooms go quiet when everyone realizes they're watching something they can't unsee. Derek tried to talk over it. This is standard business practice. This is how. The Coast Guard contracting representative cut in flatly, not unkindly. Sir, self-dealing on a federally contracted entity isn't standard practice. It's a reportable finding. Nobody said another word for almost 30 seconds. I've never heard silence that loud in my life. I want to be clear about something. I didn't stand up and deliver some speech. I didn't call Derek names in front of that room, even though every part of me wanted to. I just sat there, quiet, hands folded, wearing my husband's anchor pin, and let the truth do what truth does when it's finally allowed to be looked at directly. What happened after wasn't revenge. It was process. The state audit, once formalized, referred the related party findings to the Federal Contracting Compliance Office, given the Coast Guard work. Derek was removed as an authorized signer on federal contracts pending review, a decision made by regulators, not by me. The company's board, which under Eric's restored ownership now legally required my sign-off on major structural decisions, voted to bring in an independent operating manager while the audit concluded. Derek kept his original equity stake. He did not keep his office, his signing authority, or, eventually, his seat at that table. The company survived. It just survived honestly, for the first time in a while. I never asked for Derek to lose anything. I only ever asked for what Eric had already legally given me before he died, and for the truth to be visible where it had been hidden. The system did the rest, the way it's supposed to. A few months after all of it settled, I drove down to the Veterans Cemetery outside Pensacola on a quiet Tuesday morning. Just me. No Josie that day. Just me and a small bundle of white carnations Eric always liked, for no reason he ever explained. I sat on the grass in front of his headstone for a long time. LT CMDR Eric J. Calloway, USN. Below that, the dates. Below that, the words we chose together, years before either of us thought we'd need them. Flew high, landed soft, loved harder. I told him about the audit. I told him Josie made honor roll. I told him his brother wasn't running things anymore, and that I didn't feel good about it, exactly, but I felt right about it, which is different, and maybe better. Here's what I've come to understand, sitting on that grass, that I didn't understand standing at his casket 11 months earlier. Derek thought love was something you performed loudly, in front of witnesses, when it was convenient. Eric thought love was something you built quietly, in a lawyer's safe, 2 years before you'd ever need anyone to see it. One of those men wanted credit. The other one just wanted to make sure I'd be okay, even from underground, even without an audience. That's the whole story, really. Real love doesn't need anyone to believe it. It just needs to be true. That's my story. If you've made it this far, I'd genuinely love to know. Would you have taken Derek's check? Or would you have done what I did? Tell me down in the comments. And if this is your first time hearing one of these stories, go ahead and subscribe. I've got more like this one coming.